Someone inside the Justice Department made a decision. Not a policy decision, not a bureaucratic oversight, a decision. Someone looked at specific FBI documents, identified the exact pages that contradicted the Attorney General's sworn testimony, and removed them from the public database. Then Pam Bondi walked into Congress and said there was no evidence. Technically, she was right, because the evidence was gone. What she didn't know, or didn't expect, is that the FBI numbers its documents. Every page gets a code, and when you remove pages, the codes don't lie. The gaps are still there, invisible to the eye, visible to anyone who knows how to look. An NPR reporter looked, and then a congressman named Dan Goldman walked onto the House floor and read what was supposed to stay buried. Not because he wanted a headline, because the floor of Congress was the only place left in this country where those documents could be read out loud without being stopped. Watch what happens when he starts reading. Not just what he says. Watch the room. Because silence in that moment is its own kind of answer.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to discuss this administration's massive cover-up of the Epstein files in order to conceal President Trump's involvement. This cover-up reached its apex last month when Attorney General Pam Bondi falsely testified under oath before the House Judiciary Committee. The Attorney General testified, quote, "There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that," unquote. This is a lie. In the 3 million or so documents that the DOJ has disclosed to Congress under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, there is credible evidence that Donald Trump committed a crime. And that, of course, excludes the nearly 3 million pages that the DOJ is refusing to turn over. Donald Trump is mentioned thousands of times in the Epstein files. There are multiple allegations that he sexually assaulted young girls. But I want to focus on one victim's allegations that the FBI unquestionably found to be credible. The DOJ tried to hide reports of 3 of the 4 interviews that this victim gave to the FBI, but pressure from the media and Congress forced them to disclose them. And now we know why. She credibly accuses Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her when she was between 13 and 15. In each of her interviews, this victim recited the same account of her interaction with Donald Trump. On August 7th, 2019, she explained that she was between 13 and 15 when she was left alone with Donald Trump, who, quote, mentioned something to the effect of, "Let me teach you how little girls are supposed to be." Trump unzipped his pants and put her head down, quote, down to his penis, bit the S out of it. Trump struck the victim and said words to the effect of, "Get this little B the hell out of here." The victim advised that she bit Trump's penis because he disgusted her. She provided some additional details in the next interview 2 weeks later, and then a month later, she met again with the FBI and asked, quote, what the point would be of providing the information at this point in her life when there was a strong possibility nothing could be done about it. She didn't speak to the FBI again. But the FBI certainly found her story credible. In a 21-page PowerPoint presentation that the FBI made to prosecutors, they included this victim's testimony. They would not have done so if they did not find the evidence credible, which means that Attorney General Bondi lied when she stated under oath that there is no evidence that Donald Trump committed a crime. But we're just scratching the surface, because the Epstein files also reveal that Donald Trump has made false statements over the past quarter century about Jeffrey Epstein. We know in 2002 he called him a terrific guy and said, quote, "It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side." In a birthday card 2003 that Donald Trump gave to Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday, Donald wrote for himself that we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Enigmas never aged. Have you noticed that? A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday. And may every day be another wonderful secret. But in that same year, Palm Beach County opened an investigation into Epstein that eventually was turned over to the FBI. The investigation became public in 2006, and the Palm Beach County police chief received a call quickly after from Donald Trump, where Trump told him, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this." What innocent person calls the police chief about an investigation upon just learning about it? The recent documents also show that Jeffrey Epstein emailed Ghislaine Maxwell and said, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Redacted victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned." Trump also denied that he ever went on Epstein's plane. But of course, the Southern District of New York said that he was on his plane 8 times, often with young women. The reason why this matters is because we don't have half of the Epstein files. And if the Attorney General is covering this up in such a degree that she is redacting things from Congress, that she then, redacting things from the public that she then shows to Congress, what else is she covering up? And I would just show that this document here was redacted to the public, it was unredacted to Congress, and it completely disputes everything that Donald Trump has said about Jeffrey Epstein, about what he knew about the allegations, about his disgusting behavior, about whether he'd ever been to Jeffrey Epstein's house, saying, "I may have been there with my wife." Asked if any young girls were there. No. He may have had children of guests, but that's it. Well, we know that's not the case. Now, why is this important? Because if the Attorney General is covering up this information that she then reveals to Congress, what else is she covering up about Donald Trump's involvement in the Epstein files? I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain, again, from engaging in
Let me tell you what Dan Goldman did, and why it matters that it had to happen on a congressional floor at all. Goldman is not a backbench politician looking for cameras. He is a former federal prosecutor out of the Southern District of New York, lead attorney for House Democrats during Trump's first impeachment. A man who spent years in courtrooms deciding what evidence means, what credibility looks like, and what happens when both are present but inconvenient to powerful people. When someone with that background takes the House floor and says, "The Attorney General lied under oath," that is not political theater. That is a trained legal mind reading a documented record and calling it what it is. So let's start with the lie itself, because it is specific, it is provable, and it has a paper trail. On February 11th, Pam Bondi appeared before the House Judiciary Committee and stated, under oath, that there is no evidence Donald Trump committed a crime. Not insufficient evidence, not evidence that hasn't been fully evaluated. No evidence. Those are not interchangeable phrases in a legal setting. No evidence is an absolute claim, and absolute claims are the easiest kind to disprove. All you need is one document. The FBI had 21 pages. Here's what those pages are and why they matter so much. The FBI doesn't build internal prosecutorial briefing documents as a routine administrative exercise. A 21-page PowerPoint prepared for prosecutors is a prosecutorial argument. It is the FBI saying, here is what we have, here is who said it, here is why we believe them, and here is why you should too. When a victim's account is included in that document, the FBI has already cleared a credibility threshold that most allegations never reach. They cross-referenced the testimony. They evaluated its internal consistency across multiple interviews. They concluded it was worth a prosecutor's time. That is what credible means inside a federal law enforcement agency. It is not an opinion. It is an institutional finding. And Bondi's sworn statement erased it with 4 words. Now, here is what Goldman didn't have time to tell you. 3 weeks before his speech, NPR published an investigation that found something specific and verifiable. The Justice Department had removed at least 53 pages of FBI interview records from the public database. Not misplaced them, removed them. And the way NPR confirmed this wasn't through a whistleblower or a leaked memo. It was through page numbering codes. The FBI stamps every document with a sequential tracking number. When pages are missing, The gap shows up in the DOJ's own records. An independent journalist named Roger Sullenberger first identified the discrepancy by comparing 3 separate sets of official codes. NPR confirmed it. The DOJ's response when asked about the missing pages was that the withheld documents were either duplicates, legally protected, or part of an active investigation. Which sounds reasonable, until you see what happened after NPR published the story. After the specific serial numbers of the missing pages became public knowledge, the DOJ quietly uploaded 3 of the withheld interview records, the ones they had just described as duplicates or legally protected. If a document is a duplicate, you don't publish it after a journalist names its tracking number. If it's legally protected, a news story doesn't dissolve that protection. The only explanation that fits the sequence is the simplest one. The pages weren't there because someone decided they shouldn't be, and they reappeared because getting caught became the more urgent problem. Now I want to talk about a number. Goldman said Trump's name appears thousands of times in the released Epstein files. That framing understates it. Trump's name appears over 38,000 times in the documents disclosed so far. That is not the footprint of a casual acquaintance, and the DOJ has admitted to withholding nearly 48,000 additional files, described as offline for further review. So when Goldman said we don't have half the files, that is the documented state of affairs under a law Trump himself signed. The Epstein Files Transparency Act passed the Senate unanimously and was signed by Trump. The law instructs the Attorney General to release the investigation records publicly, with narrow exceptions, primarily to protect survivor identities. What actually happened was the reverse. The DOJ released identifying information about those who were harmed while redacting the names of powerful figures. That is not a clerical error. That is a choice. And here is the detail from that hearing that I have not been able to stop thinking about. Survivors attended Bondi's Judiciary Committee appearance in February. They sat in the room directly behind her. Representative Pramila Jayapal asked them to raise their hands if they had been unable to meet with the DOJ about the harm they experienced. Every person in that room raised their hand. Bondi did not turn around. She did not acknowledge them. She continued facing forward. I don't need to editorialize that image. It editorializes itself. Now let's go back to the testimony, because there is one detail in Goldman and Ted Lieu's formal letter to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche that needs to land properly. The letter calls for a special counsel investigation into Bondi for potential false statements under oath. It points to the 21-page internal DOJ report as the primary contradiction. But here is the sentence that changes everything about how you read Bondi's testimony. The letter notes that Bondi herself was observed watching over members of Congress while they reviewed the investigation files at a separate DOJ facility. She was in the room. She watched them read the documents. She saw what was in them. And then she went before Congress and said there was nothing there. This is no longer a question of whether she knew. She was present. The documents contradicting her sworn statement were reviewed under her supervision before she delivered that testimony. That is not an oversight. That is a sequence of events. I also want to bring in a voice that carries more weight on this story than almost anyone else. Julie K. Brown is the Miami Herald investigative reporter whose years of work first exposed the true scale of Epstein's network. She told PBS NewsHour that what stands out about the NPR findings is that we know the reports exist. The tracking numbers prove it. But we don't have the reports themselves. Brown has spent years watching this case be managed by powerful institutions. What she is describing now matches a pattern she has seen before. Different administration, same approach. When someone who has spent that many years on a single story says she recognizes the pattern, that is worth taking seriously. A Quinnipiac national poll found that 63% of Americans disapprove of the administration's handling of the Epstein files. Only 17% approve. And those are not exclusively Democrats. This story was originally amplified by pro-Trump media personalities who have since gone notably quiet. Even Republican Representative Thomas Massie said the best way to clear Trump's name is to release all the files. Which is not a sentence you say if all the files have already been released. The House Oversight Committee voted 24-19, with 5 Republicans joining Democrats, to formally subpoena Bondi to answer questions under oath. She has not complied. So here is where we actually are. The Attorney General made an absolute claim under oath. The FBI's own documents directly contradict it. An NPR investigation found that specific pages contradicting that claim had been removed from the public database. Those pages reappeared after their tracking numbers became public. The AG was present when the contradicting documents were reviewed before she testified. 2 members of Congress have formally requested a special counsel investigation. Nearly 48,000 files remain withheld. Survivors sat in the room behind her with their hands raised. And the administration's position is that nothing is being hidden. Here is what I keep coming back to. The original defense in this story was simple. There is no evidence. That defense collapsed the moment Goldman read the documents out loud. So the defense shifted. Now it is, you cannot prove what is in the files we are not releasing. And with 48,000 documents still sitting offline, they may technically be right. But there is a word for a system where the people controlling the evidence are also the people deciding what the evidence shows. It is not transparency. It is not justice. The question this case leaves open is not whether the cover-up happened. The question is whether anyone with the institutional power to stop it will decide the truth is worth more than the protection it would cost them. So far, the answer has been no. The only thing that changes that calculation is sustained pressure from people who understand exactly what is being hidden and why. You now understand it.